You stopped eating bread. You gave up wine. You walk 30 minutes every single day. And still, every morning, your pants are tighter. You suck in your stomach before anyone sees you. You avoid mirrors after the shower. And no one, not your trainer, not your doctor, not that diet app, has told you the real reason this is happening. Because it was never about the food. There's something nobody prepares you for when your body starts to shift in your 40s or 50s. It's not the hot flashes. Those, at least, people talk about. It's the moment you look down at your midsection and realize, this doesn't belong to you. This belly doesn't match what you eat. It doesn't reflect the discipline you've carried your entire adult life. And that disconnect between effort and result is where the real damage begins. Not physical damage, something deeper. The kind that makes you question yourself. I've sat across from hundreds of women who start the conversation the exact same way. They lean forward, they lower their voice, and they say something like, "I swear I'm not overeating," as if they need to defend themselves, as if someone already accused them of lying. And every time I hear it, something inside me tightens, because I know what happened before they found me. I know who failed them. Let me tell you about Corinne. Corinne was 53. She ran a small architecture firm in Portland. 2 kids in college, married 26 years. On the outside, she had it together. Organized, disciplined, the kind of person who color codes her calendar. But when she walked into my office, her hands were shaking. Not from nervousness, from exhaustion so deep it had settled into her bones. She told me she'd gained 19 pounds in 14 months, almost all of it around her belly. She showed me her food diary. It was meticulous. Every gram measured, every calorie logged, every meal photographed and time-stamped. She was eating 1,400 calories a day, walking 5 days a week, sometimes 6. And the weight kept climbing. She'd been to 3 different practitioners before me. One told her to eat less. Think about that. 1,400 calories, and the advice was eat less. Another prescribed a meal plan that cut her to 1,100. She followed it perfectly, gained 2 more pounds. The third, and this part still sits in my chest, looked at her and said, "Maybe you just need to accept that bodies change with age." Accept it. As if the problem were her expectations, not their blindness. Here's what none of them did. Not a single one. None of them asked Corinne a simple question. How are you sleeping? Because if they had, they would have heard that Corinne hadn't slept more than 4 consecutive hours in over a year. That she woke at 2 or 3 a.m. with her heart pounding like she'd sprinted up a staircase. That she spent mornings in a fog so thick she forgot client meetings. That she carried her phone in a death grip because she was terrified of missing something. A call from her aging mother, a text from her kids, a work emergency. Corinne wasn't overeating. Corinne was drowning in cortisol. And that, right there, is the piece that gets erased from nearly every conversation about menopause and belly fat. The assumption is always caloric. Too much food, not enough movement, poor discipline, weak willpower. But for a staggering number of women going through perimenopause and menopause, the engine behind that stubborn abdominal weight has almost nothing to do with what's on their plate. It has everything to do with what's living in their nervous system. Let me explain this in a way that actually makes sense. Because I think most women have heard the word cortisol thrown around like confetti. Podcasts mention it, Instagram posts warn about it, but nobody sits down and explains what it really does inside your body. And more importantly, why your body starts overproducing it at this exact stage of life. That part matters enormously. Cortisol is your primary stress hormone. You already know that. But what you might not know is that cortisol has a very specific, very intimate relationship with estrogen. When estrogen is stable, which it is for most of your reproductive years, it acts as a buffer, a regulator, a safety net. It keeps cortisol in check. Think of estrogen as a thermostat in your house. When the temperature rises, when stress hits, estrogen helps bring cortisol back down to a manageable, livable level. Now, what happens during perimenopause? Estrogen doesn't just decline, it goes haywire. Some days it spikes wildly, some days it crashes through the floor. And eventually, over months and years, it trends downward. That thermostat, it breaks. Not all at once, it flickers, malfunctions, gives you false readings. And then one day, it just stops working. So now, every stressor that used to be manageable, the traffic jam, the tight work deadline, the argument with your partner, your teenager's attitude problem, your mother's declining health, the pile of dishes you don't have energy for. Every single one of those hits your nervous system harder than it used to, and your body can't regulate the response the way it did for decades. Cortisol stays elevated, not for minutes, for hours, sometimes for entire days. And your body doesn't distinguish between types of stress. It doesn't know the difference between running from danger and lying awake at 3 a.m. worrying about money. The chemical response is identical. And here's the critical part, the part that changes everything. When cortisol stays elevated chronically, your body goes into survival mode, full survival mode. It doesn't know you're stressed about a mortgage payment or a difficult boss. It thinks you're in physical danger. It thinks famine might be coming. And what does a body do? What has it done for 200,000 years of human evolution when it believes famine is near? It stores fat. Specifically, it stores visceral fat, the deep, metabolically active fat that wraps around your organs and piles up in your midsection. This isn't the same as the fat on your thighs or your arms. Visceral fat is biologically different, hormonally driven, and it responds to cortisol the way a savings account responds to automatic deposits. It just keeps growing, quietly, relentlessly. This is why calorie restriction often backfires catastrophically during menopause. I cannot stress this enough. When you slash calories while your cortisol is already elevated, you're not solving the problem. You're pouring gasoline on it. Your body reads that restriction as confirmation of the threat. More danger, more famine signals, more reason to hold on to every last ounce of stored energy it can. So you eat less and you gain more. You try harder and it gets worse. Maddening. And it makes women feel like complete failures. But it's not failure. It's physiology doing exactly what it was engineered to do. Corinne cried when I explained this to her. Not from sadness, from relief. 20 months of shame just dissolved, gone in one conversation. She wasn't broken, she wasn't lazy, she wasn't secretly binging at midnight. She wasn't lying to herself or anyone else about what she ate. Her body was doing precisely what it was designed to do under chronic, unrelenting stress, without the hormonal protection it had relied on for 30 years. Now, and this is where it gets even more layered, so stay with me. Stress isn't just what you think it is. Most women, when I say stress, immediately picture emotional stress. Work pressure, family demands, financial worry, relationship friction. And yes, those absolutely count. Every single one of them spikes cortisol. But there's a whole parallel category of stress that nobody warns you about, and it might be doing even more damage because you can't even feel it happening. Physiological stress. Things your body registers as threats even when your conscious mind doesn't notice. Poor sleep? That's a massive biological stressor. Chronic low-grade inflammation from processed food? Stressor. Blood sugar spikes and crashes cycling through your day like a roller coaster? Enormous stressor. Over-exercising, especially intense cardio, without adequate recovery? Your body interprets that as a threat signal. Even under-eating, which I already mentioned, triggers the same cortisol cascade. Your body doesn't care that you chose to skip breakfast. It just registers. Fuel shortage, danger, store everything. So picture this. A woman in her early 50s. She's sleeping 5 hours a night because her body wakes her drenched in sweat. She skips breakfast. Intermittent fasting, she read, burns belly fat. She does 45 minutes of high-intensity cardio on an empty stomach. Runs on black coffee until lunch. Eats a salad. White knuckles through the afternoon on fumes. Collapses into bed at 9, exhausted but wired. Wakes up at 2 a.m. with her heart hammering against her ribs. Every single behavior in that routine, every single one, is raising cortisol. And every cortisol spike is telling her body the same thing. Store fat, protect the organs, this is not safe. We might not eat again tomorrow. She's doing everything she was told to do, and it's making her measurably worse. That's not a character flaw, that's a system failure. And the system I'm talking about isn't her body. It's the advice she was given. And this is exactly why I started looking beyond the conventional playbook. Because I kept seeing the same devastating pattern. Intelligent, disciplined women doing all the right things and getting punished for it. Their bodies weren't defying logic. Their bodies were following a different logic. One that nobody had explained to them. When I finally found something that addressed this from the root, that worked with the body's stress response instead of against it, I knew I couldn't keep it to myself. I left it in the first link in the description and in the pinned comment. I honestly believe it could reframe everything you think you know about what's happening to your body right now. Let me come back to the research for a moment, because there's another layer here that ties everything together, and I don't want you to miss it. Researchers at Yale conducted a study that found something striking, almost unsettling. Women with chronically high cortisol levels stored significantly more abdominal fat, regardless of their total body weight. I need you to hear that clearly. Some of these women weren't even overweight by any standard BMI measurement. They were slim everywhere else. They looked healthy by every visible metric. But their midsections carried a disproportionate, dangerous amount of visceral fat. The researchers called it stress-deposited fat. And they found it correlated not with caloric intake, not with how much these women were eating, but with the frequency and duration of their cortisol elevation. There's another study from the University of California that specifically examined women going through the menopausal transition. They measured cortisol reactivity, how strongly the body responds to a given stressor. And they found that reactivity increased by nearly 40% during menopause. 40%. Meaning the exact same stressor that used to produce a small, manageable cortisol blip now produces a response almost half again as large. And the body doesn't reset easily. Cortisol has a cumulative, compounding effect. Day after day of elevated cortisol doesn't just deposit belly fat. It changes how your cells respond to insulin, pushing you toward resistance. It increases systemic inflammation. It disrupts thyroid function. It fragments your sleep architecture, which raises cortisol further, which worsens sleep, which raises cortisol again, creating a self-reinforcing loop that feeds itself like a wheel you can't stop. This is why so many women feel like everything falls apart at once. The belly fat, the brain fog, the joint pain, the fatigue, the anxiety, the insomnia. They're not separate problems. They're all branches of the same tree. And that tree is rooted in a stress response that lost its natural regulator. So what do you actually do about it? And I know, this sounds counterintuitive after everything I've described. But the first step is not to do more. It's to do less. Strategically, deliberately, intelligently less. The single most impactful change I've witnessed in my practice, and I mean this with everything I have, isn't a new supplement. It isn't a miracle diet or a trendy protocol. It's nervous system regulation. Teaching the body at the cellular level that it is safe, that the threat is not real, that it can stand down. What does that look like? It's different for every woman. For some, it means replacing punishing HIIT sessions and spin classes with walking, restorative yoga, or progressive strength training. Exercises that build capacity without triggering a stress alarm. For others, it means eating more, not less. Particularly protein and healthy fats in the morning, within an hour of waking, which stabilizes blood sugar and blunts the cortisol surge that would otherwise dominate the first half of the day. For almost everyone, it means addressing sleep. Not with melatonin gummies or ambient sound machines, though those have their place, but by understanding why the body keeps waking up. Very often, it's a blood sugar crash at 2 or 3 a.m. that triggers a cortisol spike, which triggers adrenaline, which jolts you awake with your heart racing. A small snack with protein and fat before bed, something as simple as a spoonful of almond butter or a few slices of turkey, can prevent that crash entirely. I've watched women start sleeping through the night for the first time in years from that one adjustment alone. One adjustment. And then there's the emotional piece, the quiet one. The piece nobody wants to discuss because it feels too soft, too abstract, too hard to measure on a lab panel. But here's the truth. And I say this as someone who spent years focused purely on the clinical side before I understood this. If you are carrying resentment you've never voiced, unprocessed grief from a loss you were told to get over, chronic people-pleasing that has hollowed you out, unspoken anger at a partner, a parent, a system that let you down, your body is registering every single one of those as a threat. Emotional stress is not a separate category from physical stress. Your hypothalamus does not distinguish between a tiger and a marriage that's slowly suffocating you. The cortisol output is biochemically identical. I had a patient, Nadia, 51, owned a catering company, who lost 4 inches from her waist in 3 months. She didn't change a single thing about her diet, not one meal. What she changed was everything else. She started therapy. She set firm boundaries with her adult children who were still treating her like an on-call service. She stopped volunteering for every committee at her church. She started saying no without explaining why. Her cortisol dropped. Her sleep deepened. Her belly changed. Not because of what she ate, because of what she finally stopped carrying. That still gives me chills when I think about it. Because it demolishes the one lie the diet industry has sold you your entire life. That this is about calories in, calories out. It's not. Not at this stage. Not with this biology. You cannot out-exercise, out-supplement, or out-restrict a nervous system that is locked in survival mode. The fat isn't stubbornness, it's armor. And your body won't drop the armor until it believes the war is over. If what I've shared today hit something in you, if you're sitting there right now feeling like someone finally named the thing you couldn't explain, then I want you to check the pinned comment or the first link right below this video. I put something there that goes much deeper into this, and it's helped a lot of the women I work with start turning this around in ways they didn't think were possible anymore. It's worth a few minutes of your time, truly. I want to be careful here, though. I'm not saying nutrition doesn't matter. It absolutely does. I'm not saying exercise is pointless. Movement is essential. And I'm certainly not saying you should stop seeking answers or stop paying attention to your health. What I am saying is this. If you have been doing everything right, following every rule, tracking every calorie, pushing through every workout, and your body still isn't responding, stop blaming yourself. Please. The problem is not your willpower. It was never your willpower. The problem is a hormonal shift that rewrote the rules of your metabolism, and nobody handed you the updated playbook. Stress during menopause is not just an emotional inconvenience. It's a metabolic force, one that literally reshapes your body from the inside out, organ by organ, cell by cell. And once you truly understand that, not just intellectually, but in your bones, everything changes. The guilt lifts. The shame dissolves like fog under morning sun. And for the first time in what might be months or years, you stop fighting your body and start listening to it. You stop punishing it and start protecting it. You stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start asking, "What does my body need?" Corinne? 6 months after that first appointment, she'd lost 11 pounds. But I'll tell you what mattered more to her. She told me she'd stopped weighing herself entirely. She said, and I wrote this down because I never wanted to forget it. She said, "For the first time in my life, I feel like my body and I are on the same team." Same team. That's what this is really about. So if you're watching this right now, if you've been quietly blaming the bread, the pasta, the dessert you had last weekend, the glass of wine you poured after a long day, let it go. Look deeper. Look at your sleep. Look at your stress. Look at the invisible weight you're carrying that has nothing to do with food and everything to do with a life that asks too much and gives too little back. Your body isn't broken, it's responding. And when you finally change what it's responding to, it will change back. If this reached you, if something clicked, subscribe to this channel. There is so much more I want to share with you. Things nobody told me either, until I saw them with my own eyes in woman after woman who'd been told she was out of options. You're not out of options, not even close. You're just getting started.